Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rise Radio, Sinoland in sunny Chiang Mai, Thailand. In our new house here, my wife and I are moving into this lovely little rental property in Chiang Mai. If you can see, it's totally empty. We're waiting for stuff to be delivered, etc. So bear with me. It's the first podcast that I have done from here. This one is a really bizarre one because the story about this podcast and article started 2 years ago. So enjoy the ride. Title is Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, Donald Trump and the Falsity of Imperialism's Narrative. Why BRI is the perfect opportunity for China to neutralize 500 years of the West's racist superiority paradigm. Background explanation before starting. I am deeply honored that this paper was recently published in a Chinese National Institute's journal. They decided to publish a special edition focused on the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. For 2 years, they have been collecting articles. Another journalist and I were the only two foreigners having the honor of being included in the collection. Herewith is the original English article. Looking back when I wrote it 2 years ago, it is very historically relevant. At the time, Donald Trump had been in the White House for less than a year. Everything I predicted about the West's response to BRI has come true. All right, dated 2017, October 25. Author's note, as this paper is being submitted, the CPC, the Communist Party of China's successful 19th Party Congress has just concluded. Its, quote, new era of Chinese socialism, end of quote, and 21st century vision for humanity will be taken as a public declaration of war by Western Empire's deep state, and it will respond accordingly. Therefore, to use two popular English terms, yes, the following proposals are out of the box, meaning they're original, and off the wall, meaning they're counterintuitive, but they are now more relevant and urgent than ever before, not only for BRI, for the sake of the whole planet. I am honored that your institute has invited me to write an article about China's Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, a history-changing visionary blueprint launched by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013. It includes two parts. First is the Overland Silk Road Economic Belt, SREB, largely covering the Eurasian continent and on into Africa. The SREB harks back to the ancient Silk Roads that linked China to the rest of Eurasia. The other half of BRI is the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, the MSR, which also connects to China's past, this time seafaring exploration and trade going back thousands of years. While certainly a coincidence, the timing of establishing BRI and ongoing events being determined around the world by the West are especially intriguing. After more than 500 years of ongoing supremacy, there is no question that the arc of development of Western empire has entered into its decline phase. There are two books that explain this quite well, and both highly recommended reading. The first is The Collapse of Complex Societies by Joseph Tainter, and then the other one is Collapse, How Societies Choose to Fail by Jared Diamond. These books have intriguing hypotheses as to why all societies over the long term eventually fall. This is something China's millennial history has experienced no fewer than 6 times, including most recently 1911 with the collapse of the Qing dynasty. However, neither book considers Marxist-Leninist dialectics, which explain that every capitalist society is doomed to collapse by an ever upward spiraling concentration of wealth into fewer and fewer hands, with concomitant socioeconomic cannibalism, perpetual war in search of resources, and fascism to control the increasingly impoverished masses. Thus, by analyzing the hypotheses of Tainter and Diamond and synthesizing theirs with Marxist-Leninist theory, we can safely say that capitalist Western empire's eventual collapse will be like no other in human history, given its systemic extremes and global reach on every continent. Do I want to be alive when it happens? For the sake of Schadenfreude, yes. However, when it does arrive, the survival of the human race may be severely challenged or even extinguished due to a final paroxysm of nuclear war, with the West and Israel hoping to cling to its colonial system of tyranny, exploitation, and extraction. It may seem that I digress from the topic of BRI, but not really. Western imperialism is doing in spades what it does best against every country on earth that is not a client state: economic extortion, geopolitical aggression, varying degrees of cold and hot war, as well as relentless clandestine sabotage. This, of course, includes China. But more critically, any country that agrees to cooperate within the BRI framework is, by imperial definition, an enemy of empire. The United States, the supreme sovereign of Western empire, as they join the BRI blueprint, America's supposed allies, in reality client states, will be considered enemies within its own ranks. This includes most of Western Europe and the Middle Eastern states that are aligned in America's global satrap hierarchy. The potential risk for these BRI partners to be on the receiving end of ever greater Western extortion and violence cannot be lost on China's leadership. Much of this was couched and finessed within the norms of international diplomacy and Western alliances until January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump was inaugurated as America's 45th president. The only clean elections in the United States happen at the neighborhood level, school districts, and town councils. Above this level, they are frequently rigged. See the book China Rising, Capitalist Roads, Socialist Destinations, pages 73 to 94, the chapter entitled A Tale of Two Democracies, What It Is Like to Vote in the United States Compared to France. Good book title. I think Trump's election was a miscalculation by America's deep state, which includes Wall Street, the Department of Defense and its military contractors, the global oil bankers, Rockefeller, Rothschild, Morgan, etc., clandestine cliques, Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, National Security Administration, NSA, Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, etc., and their propaganda apparatus in the global mainstream media, Hollywood and New York. Hillary Clinton was the chosen establishment puppet. Both sides undoubtedly cheated as usual, but the Clinton side underestimated the Trump turnout and didn't cheat enough. Whatever rigging the Trump side contributed to, superfluous. There is the opposing speculation that in reality the deep state made sure that Trump got elected in order to create chaos and instability to such a point so that the American public would readily accept a, quote, legal, end of quote, coup to remove him from office and replace him with a military junta under the guise of, quote, continuity of government, end of quote, also known as COG. COG was actually implemented after 9/11 in the United States, and more on 9/11 later. Either way, to say that all hell broke loose in America and by default among its many client countries is a gross understatement. One only has to look at the headlines in any language across the globe to realize this. Before Trump, BRI and Western Empire were largely unrecognized to world citizens. BRI continues to barely make a blip on the global stage. This while bombastic, mercurial, theatrical, and deep state outsider President Trump is proving to be a megaphone for everything that is wrong and fake about the West, as well as being the perfect catalyst to accelerate its fall. So, what is China's leadership in the Communist Party of China, the CPC, to do with the unbelievable circumstances happening since Trump became U.S. president? The last thing your institute needs is an article extolling the virtues of BRI. My goal here is to play the role. My goal here is to play the role of devil's advocate, think outside the box, and propose challenging ideas. This is in order to avoid complacency and to precipitate a conversation among China's opinion makers and leaders to possibly look at alternative options to assure the short and long-term success of BRI. Even more frightening is the potential nuclear destruction of the human race, which could too easily be caused by China's enemies, thus making BRI a moot point. Number 5 of the 36 stratagems of war is, quote, loot a burning house, end of quote. I think we can all agree that President Trump is the gunpowder that has ignited the Western Empire to flame. But can China and its allies avoid getting badly burned in the process? The classic Chinese long game will not work if the West, including insane Israel, pulls the nuclear trigger. Even in exchange of 5 to 10 of today's megaton hydrogen bombs, likely push Mother Earth's delicate ecosystem into a humanity-ending nuclear winter. Why take the chance? I have a theory as to why even a burning Western house of fire, in other words, a collapsing empire, can maintain its dictatorial grip over much of the world's people and will likely continue to do so until a powerful anti-capitalist country like China adopts a new and smarter game plan. It is because of the West's unparalleled global propaganda machine, which is aggressively pushed and obsessively managed by the aforementioned deep state. And the reason that the vast majority of humanity, including the Chinese people and their allies, still give the West the benefit of the doubt is due to the image that the deep state so artfully projects on all of us. Propaganda has been ceaselessly pushed around the world since Alexander the Great's murderous conquests, which happened across much of Asia in the 3rd century BC. This Western racist superiority paradigm, end of quote, tells us that, number 1, Western civilization is intellectually superior to the rest of the world. Number 2, Western civilization has no technical rival on Earth. And number 3, Western civilization is morally and spiritually above all other peoples. Sadly, the vast majority of the human race accepts this fact, while outside of China, only a tiny percent of humanity even knows what BRI is. This phenomenon has deep roots in racism. Around the planet, Caucasians are perceived to be mentally and morally superior to the world's non-white races, proving just how successful the West's pedantic mantra really is. As BRI continues to advance, the West will use this successful superiority propaganda to destroy BRI's, quote, Chinese, end of quote, meaning racially inferior credibility and reliability. The precedence is well established. Everywhere China goes to cooperate economically, the Imperial West is right there to destroy the dream. As BRI continues to spread its wings, the deep state will be right there, spending billions to destroy it at every opportunity, having a terrible impact on China's image, and causing untold suffering and losses with its BRI partners. The list is long. Look no further than Afghanistan, Ecuador, Iraq, Iran, Libya, Myanmar, Nigeria, North Korea, Philippines, Russia, Serbia, in parentheses, South, end of parentheses, Sudan. Sudan's been divided now. Syria, Ukraine, and Venezuela, to name a few. Their cooperation with China is not the sole reason they have been attacked and in some cases destroyed by imperial tyranny, but it is definitely an important contributing factor. China has 2 choices. One is to keep going along to get along and playing the long game as the West slowly devours itself. The problem is, even though the Western house is ablaze, it is a It is big and it is global, so it could take generations to finally implode. And in the meantime, nuclear holocaust hangs thickly in the air. Therefore, I propose to short-circuit this conundrum by changing the world's attitude that everything Caucasians do must be better than anything the Chinese offer, including BRI. The only way to do this is to destroy the foundations upon which Westerners build their civilizational and racial superiority paradigm, that they are smarter, more creative, more just and righteous. In order to weaken these foundations, the best way to attack them is at their vulnerable points. The 36 stratagems of war and Sun Art of War consider a frontal assault, even if the enemy is weaker, as a last resort. Why needlessly lose so many soldiers and citizens when victory can be won with elliptical strategies and asymmetric tactics? But when the time is right to attack, one must be decisive, not hesitate, and push through to victory. Chairman Mao and his generals brilliantly proved this to be true in the Korean and Sino-Indian Wars. Now it is not the moment for a full face-to-face showdown with the West, but with Donald Trump loudly personifying the West's decline, the time is right for China to undermine empire by elliptically attacking its weak points while continuing to bolster BRI with its development partners. Below are 5 false Western narratives to exploit. Destroying their supposed veracity would greatly undermine the West's racist superiority paradigm of higher intelligence, greater creativity, and superior morality. In chronological order, they are: number 1, the 15th century age of exploration; number 2, germ warfare during the Korean War; number 3, the John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy assassinations; number 5, the Apollo moon landings, and number 4, the Apollo moon landings, and number 5, September 11, 2001, famous 9/11. Let's start with the 15th century age of exploration. The whole Western age of exploration narrative is a cruel and cynical myth for 2 reasons. First, as explained in many books, notably An Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, Revisioning American History, Westerners were not explorers, but savage, genocidal pirates who exterminated about 100 million natives in the New World alone. It was no different in Africa and Asia, where the great Indian philosopher Paul calculated the British killed up to 500 million of his fellow citizens in the Crown Jewel alone. Others get verifiable numbers as high as 1.8 billion. The West has committed the greatest crimes against humanity, one terrifying global holocaust after another. The vast majority of the world's people consider Caucasians to be morally and spiritually superior to their own civilizations. Western myth is taken as gospel in China too. Several Chinese friends have told me that in school they learned that Christopher Columbus was a great and daring explorer who, quote, discovered, end of quote, the New World. In fact, he was personally responsible for the extermination of millions of natives. Chinese friends have told me they are taught the whitewashed myth of, quote, Western exploration, end of quote. Every other European supposedly called explorer, the pirate, after Columbus, just multiplied his genocidal game plan by many magnitudes. I have talked to hundreds of Chinese citizens across the country from all walks of life who told me that the West and its institutions are morally and intellectually better than we are. This is tragic evidence of the deep state's incredibly successful propaganda perfected over the last 2,500 years. Exposing the reality of the West's marauding piracy around the world in the 15th to 17th centuries, Western racist superiority paradigm number 3, moral and spiritual superiority, becomes a shameful farce. What better way to contrast the West's ignominious ongoing colonialism, the nonviolent, peaceful blueprint of China's BRI? The second Western myth about the age of exploration is that Caucasians were technically superior to anyone at that time, including the Chinese. Even if you only accept the standard narrative that Chinese Admiral Zheng He's exploration was limited to Asia and the east coast of Africa, this myth is totally false. But 99% of the world's non-Chinese don't know this. Well, my Chinese friends tell me that everything they learned at school about Zheng He was reduced to one paragraph, even though he was by far one of history's greatest navigators and explorers. The real lie is that Westerners, quote, discovered, end of quote, the New World. Gavin Menzies, in his majestic books 1421 and 1434, proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, physical evidence, Zheng He and his captains landed all over the Western Hemisphere long before Columbus was even born. The American Public Broadcasting System, government-owned, a nice 2-hour documentary on Mr. Menzies' 1421, but only aired it once and it was soon forgotten. In the meantime, the deep state mainstream media has spent much time and energy refuting all of Menzies' years of research. I bought into this propaganda myself for 10 years before finally reading the books. I was speechless. Evidence is overwhelming. Alongside BRI's 21st century maritime Silk Road, China should be juxtaposing the truth about its intellectual, creative, and moral superiority in the 15th century. Attacking the Western false narrative undermines all three racist paradigms since the Chinese explored, traded, and left colonies across the New World much earlier without exterminating millions of natives in the process. Ironically, the Chinese colonies that started in the New World in the early 15th century were also decimated by the West pirates, starting with Columbus in 1492, along with all their indigenous neighbors. Number 2, germ warfare during the Korean War. To understand how fearful the West is of the world learning about America's germ warfare during the Korean War, one only has to look at the current situation 70 years later. After the United Nations report of the International Scientific Commission for the Investigation of the Facts Concerning Bacterial Warfare in Korea and China, often abbreviated ISCR, was released in 1952, it was viciously attacked and incessantly suppressed by the mainstream media across the West non-stop year after year. This ruthless campaign of total media blackout and censorship was conducted in a transatlantic coordinated fashion. The ISC's most famous member, Dr. Joseph Needham, was savagely vilified and his reputation trashed for years thereafter. He always maintained the truth of the report. The mainstream media made sure the world thought that he had recanted. However many copies of the ISCR were published, the deep state went to extraordinary extremes to find them and destroy them. How rare is a copy of this 667-page tome on printed paper? The last known English language copy in print was sold at auction in 2013 and never saw the light of day thereafter. I think we can guess that the deep state paid any price to buy it and keep it censored. Japan recently came clean about its use of bio and chemical weapons during World War II, admitted to its infamous Unit 731 in Harbin, China. I bought 2 copies of the 1952 ISC report in Chinese from book dealers in China. I have in hand, as well as an original copy of, quote, Our Complaint, end of quote, which contains citizens' testimonies of America's many crimes against humanities in their villages. Amazingly, a colleague of mine found the long-lost English version of the ISCR on Google Books. He managed to download a high-quality PDF of it, making it available for the whole world. He, other writers, and I went on to create the Bioweapon Truth Commission, the BWTC, its global online library, which we abbreviate to GOL. Having reviewed the English version, it is easy to see why the deep state has pathologically worked for 70 years to keep the ISCR flushed down the Orwellian memory hole, helping to assure that America's use of bioweapons during the Korean War would remain expunged from human consciousness. This is because the ISCR is so detailed and so complete that it absolutely proves the demonic truth about the West. America's use of Unit 731's biological weapon technology in Korea strikes a powerful blow to Western racist superiority paradigm number 3, that they are morally and spiritually superior. Exposing this truth will go a long way to weakening the West's vaunted, quote, shining beacon on a hill, end of quote, reputation, giving China added breathing space to promote and protect its noble, cooperative, win-win BRI. Next, the John F. Kennedy, JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., MLK, and Robert F. Kennedy, RFK assassinations. If you believe that JFK was murdered by the lone communist Lee Harvey Oswald, even in the United States, you are in the minority. Ever since the bogus Warren Commission came out with its sham report in 1963, a majority of American citizens still believe that he was killed by the deep state. In the aforementioned book, China Rising, the chapter, quote, on this 9/11, why John F. Kennedy was killed by the deep state, America's first coup d'etat, end of quote, pages 52 to 55, does a thorough job of explaining what Americans already know in their guts is the truth. James Douglas's book, JFK and the Unspeakable, Why He Died and Why It Matters, includes in-depth research and detail. It's no different with Martin Luther King Jr.'s murder. In 1999, the King family conducted a civil trial which was filled with sworn testimony affidavits. The jury only took minutes to convict the U.S. government for Dr. King's killing. Thanks to the courageous work of the King's lawyer, William F. Pepper, a solid U.S. majority believes the deep state was responsible for Martin Luther King's murder. Mr. Pepper has written a definitive account of this sordid saga, naming names, including the Memphis hospital director who suffocated Dr. King to death with a pillow after he arrived, still alive. His book is called The Plot to Kill King, The Truth Behind the Assassination of Martin Luther. One of his interviews about this book and with its closing comments about JFK makes for spine-tingling listening. Mr. Pepper has now turned his attention to RFK's assassination. Robert F. Kennedy is representing RFK's patsy, quote, killer, end of quote, Sirhan Sirhan, in a civil case using the same successful game plan as the MLK trial. Has all the evidence that RFK was killed by the U.S. government. It takes years to push a case like this to justice. The truth about these 3 state-sponsored murders of America's own leaders shatters beyond any reasonable doubt the West's racist superiority paradigm number 3. Bringing them to light in every country where China is cooperating with BRI should be included in its propaganda strategy. And next, the Apollo moon landings. Until this year, I always wondered about whether the Americans landed men on the moon during the Apollo space project 1969 to 1972. Any doubt was shattered by reading David McGowan's book, Wagging the Moondoggie, parts 1 through 14, available for free online. Like me, you will laugh at yourself for your gullibility and innocence swallowing such a humongous fabrication all your life. How did they pull it off? The joke at NASA was that, quote, we have Hollywood and the Soviets don't, end of quote. And that sums up the truth. You come to realize that the deep state can make all of humanity believe anything, absolutely anything. After reading Mr. McGowan's detailed and factually demonstrated book, anybody with a minimum knowledge of science knows humankind has never been beyond the Van Allen radiation belts just a few hundred kilometers into space. Unlike the aforementioned 3 assassinations, only a small percentage of Americans believe the moon landings were staged. Debunking this colossal lie destroys all 3 racist superiority paradigms that Westerners are smarter, more creative, and morally superior. Once all the background is explained in the Moondoggie book, it is easy to show people the truth because it is so obvious. It is more easily accepted since it is less ideological. So this is easily the best weak link to attack first in support of BRI. September 11th, 2001, or 9/11. The staged explosions on September 11th, 2001 that brought down 3 New York skyscrapers, blew up the Pentagon, and in a supposed plane crash in a Pennsylvania field, manifestly false flags. China Rising chapter, from the book China Rising, chapter entitled, quote, Deep State West Wing, end of quote, explains the absurdity of the 9/11 official cover-up. Even a majority of Americans think there was a cover-up about 9/11, and these numbers continue to grow every year. Exposing this heinous Western crime against humanity makes a powerful juxtaposition to China's noble, cooperative BRI vision, and proves that the West racist superiority paradigm number 3 is a myth. Now, towards the conclusion. I appreciate the fact that this kind of counter-punching against a foe is not something the Chinese establishment is fond of doing. But the circumstances in the West, its dangerous decline, a demagogue in the White House, the human race on the precipice of nuclear holocaust, all calls for exceptional means. Not to mention that in spite of all this, West racist superiority paradigm continues to keep a stranglehold on the world's peoples. Ironically, most who are victims of Euranglo lands, that mean NATO, plus Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, Euranglo lands imperial colonialism. Unless its paradigm is undermined and discredited, the sooner the better, the West can continue to be in a position to sabotage China's BRI, as well as tyrannize all of BRI's cooperative partners. How can China achieve this subtly and adroitly without blaring large headlines on the front page of the People's Daily, quote, America's moon landings were a hoax, end of headline quote. First, it must be realized that doing so is not that outrageous, since a growing number of Westerners already doubt the official stories being maintained by the deep state. There is already a swelling movement in the U.S. to expose Columbus for what he was and to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Yes, world history will be rewritten when China opens its remaining Ming Dynasty archives on Zhanghe, and when Gavin Menzies finds the money he needs, something China should finance 100%, complete his research on China's precocious presence in the New World. But humanity is owed the truth, and Chinese people deserve to have their story told. It is a moral imperative to expose America's germ warfare crimes in Korea. The majority of Americans know in their hearts that their own government perpetrated the murders of JFK, MLK, and RFK, as well as 9/11. The world's people also deserve the truth about the complete Hollywood fabrication of the moon landings. This brings up a good point. By doing this, China will burnish its reputation around the world for, quote, seeking truth from facts, end of quote, which is popularly practiced in the history of the CPC before going back to the Tang Dynasty. The world's peoples will respect and appreciate China for setting the record straight, which will cast a shining light of truth and justice on BRI. This will enhance trust and confidence in Chinese civilization that BRI needs to have maximum success over the next 100 years. Here are some ideas to discuss. Chinese media has its new China Global Television Network, CGTN, as well as China Central Television, CCTV, in foreign languages. Both can create extended series of documentaries, not just one-off videos that don't gain traction. On a regular and long-term basis, they can invite many experts on the air and report discoveries and information circulating about these topics. Edward Bernays has proved since he wrote his book Propaganda, doing a one-off report will fail. This is why PBS could show its aforementioned 1421 documentary once and not worry about a groundswell of interest to rewrite the history books, which is of course being fought ferociously by the deep state. Repetition and saturation are the key, as we can see all over China with the party's socialist propaganda. Russia and China are expanding cooperation in media and propaganda. However, two other anti-imperial socialist media outlets need to be invited to create a global colossus that can compete with BBC, CNN, and Fox News. They are Iran's Press TV and Latin America's Telesur. To date, Press TV is the only one that reports on the West's false flags, is debunking its myths, with RT starting to do so too. Russia, Chinese, and Latino allied networks need to join with Press TV and plan a long-term global strategy to destroy the West's racist superiority paradigm, promoting BRI and other cooperative efforts like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB, Brazil plus Russia plus India plus China plus South Africa, known as BRICS, Collective Security Treaty Organization, the CSTO, the Eurasian Economic Union, the EAEU, and Shanghai Cooperative Organization, the SCO. In closing, it is clear that the historical precedents of the West trying to overthrow the CPC and sabotage the country's global economic cooperation will increase as BRI continues to make inroads with traditional imperial client states. These Western satraps can pay a very heavy price for working with China, so China needs to respect and respond to the terrible risks they take for cooperating with the Chinese. China has two choices. It can continue to play the long game and hope that Western empire collapses, without world history adding a nuclear holocaust to the textbooks. If that happens, BRI is of no use anyway. Or China can short-circuit this eventuality by destroying the West's racist superiority paradigm. The only way to do this is to debunk the deep state's masterful global propaganda machine. That means exposing all the myths and false flags that keep the world's peoples brainwashed. Otherwise, the West and Israel can start World War III, and in the eyes of humanity, make sure that China takes all the blame. Something to think about, discuss, and hopefully take a new tack. Thank you for reading. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, signing out from Chiang Mai, Thailand, and our new house. All the best.